in Australia, people always say, oh, you know, why doesn't reform go for preference voting? Why isn't everyone campaigning for preference voting? Well, in Australia, the Liberals preference all the Australian right-wing independent parties beneath Labor and the Greens to make sure they never, ever get anywhere to challenge the Conservative parties, meaning, in essence, that Labor keeps getting elected, all the Greens, but never a Conservative voice. So, you know, you're right, there's something there where it's self-destructive about Conservative movements where the big Conservatives never want to give any ground to conservatism in general. But look, with these socialists, this new alliance here of communists and whatever else in France, they've just proposed a 90% tax on the rich. They also want to drop the retirement age to 60, increase the public sector and funnel vast sums of money into the renewables industry. Is France about to become the Venezuela of Europe?
I mean, the good news is, of course, what we see currently, the left, I think, is now in France at least, they're overplaying their hand because they didn't get a majority, right? You're right. They went past the goalpost as number one, but they don't have a majority. So if whatever they want to do, they will need a coalition partner, and that's not going to happen. A member of Macron's party who came in second, again, despite them having fewer votes than the National Rally, they said, and I quote, they behave like children because they think now, because they had this surprise upsetting victory, that they can call all the shots. And they say, no, you can't. Of course, it's upsetting also that that's right, because it's not going to be the left-wing program, but it's going to be a stalemate. It's going to be gridlock in France, which is also not good for the country. But I think you also allude to something that's a general problem all over Europe, which is there is a disconnect from reality. And I believe that's, by the way, right on both the political right and the political left. So when you look, by the way, it's also the same in the United States. I don't know the data about Australia, but for example, the modern welfare system, the modern welfare state as it exists in its current form is not sustainable. So this idea that, you know, you go to university until you're 25, then you work for maybe 40 years, and then you retire for another 30 years on 90% of your last salary. I mean, this is just not sustainable. We know our populations are aging, they are shrinking. The people we get via migration very often are more a drag on the social system than they are contributors to the social system. So none of this is sustainable. And I think this is where both the left and the right tend to whistle past the graveyard. But that might be a topic for another day. But apart from that, of course, you're right. I mean, this is an issue that I believe always bedevils the conservative movement, that they try to play on the field of the left. And I think you also see this in Australia. You also see this, again, all over the West, is you always have this tendency, whether it's from all the issues that supposedly conservatives care about, right? Solid finances, family policy, you name it. Like, it's always this kind of precondition of saying, of course I accept, whether it's transgenderism, or of course I accept the importance of climate change. Of course I accept that we need more renewables. But no, I mean, they never stand by what they actually, or what they supposedly stand for. And we see this, I think, in Australia as well. It's very simple, and I would wish that a politician would make that case. Right? Australia has a choice. You can sign on to the whole renewables craze like the Germans did, and then you go down the same pathway as the Germans, from being one of the world's strongest economies to becoming a sick man of Europe. Or the other choice is, you say, Australia has fantastic natural resources, it has a highly skilled labor force, and you can use all these resources to become and remain a wealthy and rich country. Those are the two options. There is no third way, but even conservative politicians kind of shy away from saying that, and I think that's the frustrating part.
Yeah, well, in Australia, you talk about the welfare system being overburdened on everybody else. Now, we've got a thing called the NDIS, which, think of it as if it were a form of healthcare system, but for it was supposed to buy things like wheelchairs and walking frames for the elderly, or to hire someone to mow the lawn for someone who can't get out of their bed, that kind of thing. And instead, we had Bill Shorten here just announced the other week that, we're going to stop sex work being included in the, and tarot card reading being included in the NDIS. I think it's the second or third biggest cost at our entire budget. It's completely, tens of billions of dollars, totally out of control. So there are things like that in every Western democracy, and they cannot keep being there because everybody else is in a cost of living crisis, and hardworking families can't afford the roof over their head anymore. But changing topic,
yeah,
right? And do you want to make a comment on that one?
No, just one last point, because you're right. I mean, the point is the welfare state was created to support those who cannot work. but it was not created to support those who don't want to work. And that's real. I know this sounds like a cliche, but that's a massive difference. Like if you're 60 years old and you're still physically fit, there is no reason to retire. I would say that there is no, you're not entitled to retire. Like if you're taking the French case, if you're a high school teacher, let's say in an affluent area, and you turn 60, I mean, you can teach on for another 10 years. There's no reason to say, I'm 60, I'm checking out.